The Blichmann BrewEasy Compact comes in two different configurations, 240 volts and 120 volts. I wanted to find out what the performance was on the 120 volt system, as well as if I can use this as a hop basket during the brew day. Full disclosure on this, Blichmann did send me the 120 volt Brew Commander as well as the 120 volt boil coil. I used them in a brew day, and I'm going to share with you all of the results and everything from it. I did want to rebrew my Total Eclipse of the Citra, one of the other beers that I had brewed on this system under 240 volt configuration. And I actually fixed my recipe this time so that I was brewing a little bit larger batch, like a 5.5 gallon batch. So let's jump into what the stats were. I'm not going to go through the whole recipe because I've already shared that once before, but I'll link it again down in the description. So I filled the BrewEasy Compact with I think it was about 7.85 gallons of water. And that was quite a bit actually, because I scaled the recipe up to like 5.5 gallon batch so that I could get a little more yield out of it this time. Last time I brewed it, I was a little low on my volume. So. Now, one of the things about the 120 volt configuration on this, it actually has a class leading, as far as I know. I haven't seen any other systems that are 120 volt that are this configuration. The Blichmann boil coil on 120 volts is a 2000 watt element. Now, with that high of power, it does change a little bit of the requirements for the system. Now, in order to run the system, you do need a 20 amp circuit. The nice thing about it is you can buy 20 amp GFCI outlets. So if you have a 20 amp circuit in your house, you can replace just the outlet. You don't have to go into the fuse panel and do all that stuff. You could also make a jumper or a inline GFI extension cord like I've done for the Anvil Foundry and some of the other systems, and use your dryer outlet. If you're interested in a video on that, just leave me a comment down below. Now let's talk about the heating of it, because it's always a concern of mine with 120 volts. So I wanted to see if the 2000 watt element really gave it enough boost to make a difference. So the heating time up to 163 degrees on 7.85 gallons was just under an hour. Now, granted, that is a lot, and that's one of the drawbacks that I always find of a 120 volt system. However, the Brew Commander does have a little bit of a trick up its sleeve in that you can do a delayed start. Now, I've completely covered the entire Brew Commander. The 120 volt version and the 240 volt version are the same as far as operation goes. I'll leave a link down in the description for my complete overview on the Brew Commander, and you can go check that out if you want to. But you can delay start this thing so that if you wanted to have your kettle full of liquid and then have it start up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, it would be heated up ready for you to brew by the time you were ready. Now, I did mash in on this, and there was a little bit more grain because I scaled up the recipe. So I did a no sparge on it, and it filled the basket up pretty much, and it was right near the edge of the basket. I did everything as I did before. A couple people had asked about the second or third valve on the kettle for the recirculation arm. I actually connected that to the tri-clamp to NPT fitting that comes on the flow gauge that's on the side. That tapered plastic piece is actually a flow gauge on the side. So it has a tri-clamp fitting on the bottom that is an NPT to tri-clamp. So I just actually use that to attach to the fitting for the recirculation arm in the system, and then I attached the linear flow valve to that. Mash went fine, everything was good. It held the mash temperature no problem. I didn't adjust the power or anything. I left the power on 100% on the element during the mash. And then I raised it up to about 165 degrees for a mash out. I don't know, I've been kind of skipping that step, but I kind of wanted to see how it did. It raised up pretty quickly. I think it was about 15 or 20 minutes to raise up to about 165. And then I pulled the basket out and did my normal, smash the grain in the basket to try to get as much liquid as possible. Wound up with 6.5 gallons in the kettle pre-boil. I figured that the 2000 watt element was probably going to be a little less boil off, obviously, than the 3750 watt 240 element. And the amount of time it took to come from 165 up to boil was about 30 minutes, which is really pretty good in my estimation. And I put the lid on while it was coming up to temperature so that, I would be trying to maximize the efficiency of the system. Now, the other nice thing about the Brew Commander is that, number one, when you get to within 5 degrees of your set mash temperature, it beeps. And then also when you get to, I think it's 201 or 202 degrees on the system, it will actually beep to let you know you're getting near boil so you can monitor it and not have a boil over. But once it reached boil, it was actually a pretty vigorous boil for a 120 volt system as far as, you know, from everything that I've used. With the boil coil, the 2000 watt boil coil, it had a pretty good little rolling boil all the way around the outside. I did try covering the kettle just a little bit with the lid like I've done with some of the other systems to get them and maintain boil. It didn't really seem to make a whole lot of difference. It did have about, I think it was probably 0.3 or 0.4 degrees difference on the system whenever I did cover with the lid. Now this recipe only calls for a first wort hop addition, so I didn't really use the basket in that fashion. What I did do was use my jaded skillet chiller to bring it down to my Whirlpool temperature, which was 170 degrees. And the thing actually worked so good, it actually blew right past 170 degrees and I wound up being about 158 or 160 degrees. So what I did was I went ahead and put this time I actually put 6 ounces of Whirlpool hops in there and pulled the chiller out, dropped the basket in, and then let everything go. I dumped the hops in there. Now the recirculation arm has holes all the way up and down the side of it, as you guys have seen before. I slid a tube up the pipe to try to block off the top holes just in case they're going to be like spraying in the basket. The other thing that I have not included detail-wise on this system in any of the other videos that I've done, that I found out after I've done the other videos, is that the sparge arm, or the recirculation arm, has a tip that comes off the end of it. So I actually pulled that tip off thinking that I would kind of recirculate in the basket while I was doing the Whirlpool. So I had the Whirlpool port engaged as well as recirculating back through that recirculation arm. It seemed like it was doing okay. I mean, I wasn't like filling up the basket or anything, but I wasn't seeing a lot of motion over the hops. So I actually pulled the arm off, stuck the tip on there, and then put it back in and cranked it up. And then I could see a lot of swirling around in the basket. Had no issues with the basket clogging up or anything. And so what I did was, once I got to the end of the 10-minute Whirlpool, I actually pulled, this was a little bit of a difficult one, pulled the basket out and put the chiller back in all in like one motion. And then while I was chilling the rest of the way down, I let the basket drain out. And I will tell you that I was very happy with how much liquid came out of the hops and how much it drained. I mean, there's a lot of surface area in the basket. So once I was done doing the chilling, I found that basically there was no liquid left in the basket at all. So all the wort had drained out of the basket and there wasn't any issue with that. Wound up boiling a little bit more than what I intended to. It was a 30-minute boil, but as it turns out, everything came out fine because I was a little bit low on my starting pre-boil gravity. And then after I boiled off a little bit more, I actually wound up with like hitting my numbers almost exactly. So I will tell you, for those of you that are in an apartment or whatever looking at the system for 120 volts, it actually does a pretty good job. I was fairly impressed with how the boil was, because that's always been a thing for me. You can definitely overcome the heat times by doing a delayed start with the controller. But overall, I think the 120 volt version of this thing is a success. I also wanted this controller and configuration because I'm definitely going to be doing a deep dive into all of these systems, going through every single specification and every single difference, pro, con, all that stuff. There's no perfect system out there, but I definitely want to do a complete overview video for you guys so you know what all the systems in this class are, how they work, what all the specifications are, what you need to know, and that'll be coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed, do that. Hit the thumbs up if you appreciated the video. This has been Brian for Short Circuited Brewers. We'll see you in the next video.